Connecting community through business, building relationships, and building Waterloo Region. 570 News proudly presents Business to Business. Here's your host, Glenn Pelletier.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Business on 570 News, powered by Allstream. We are delighted to have with us in studio a recently elected Kitchener-Waterloo NDP MPP, the always affable and extremely informative and delightful Catherine Fife. Great to have you with us. You've been here before, so we can call her a friend of the program.
Well, she's hardly a rookie, too. She's been rolling her sleeves up and getting right in there. So
yeah. Before we get to it, and McLean's on the phone again. Where is he this time? Vegas? Reno? What's he doing? Niagara Falls?
Ian, we can't hear Ian, so
we'll get McLean in a minute. We'll get him.
Yeah.
Why is he on the phone? Where is he? Is it a hockey tournament or something?
I think it's a basketball tournament, quite frankly.
Right. You know what, though? I like how he puts his kids first, but he also does the show at the same time.
Absolutely.
That's great.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
We have a lot to get to this afternoon with Ms. Fife, and before we do, how are things? How's it been going for you since the election? How's the experience been in Queen's Park, and how's it? Just your reaction now to having getting your hands dirty and dealing with the ins and outs of the legislature?
Well, it is I must tell you, it's a crazy place to work. I mean, the pace is amazing. I love the fact that I'm in the discussions, in the meetings, and I'm actually playing a role in decisions that are affecting Ontarians. But it's this in a minority setting. It changes the entire tone and tenor of the conversations that you're having. And but I'm enjoying every single day, and I love the fact that the people of Kitchener-Waterloo sent me there to get some work done, and that's where I'm focused.
I guess
Greg's mic's not up here. Liz or Catherine, can we get Greg's mic on here? There's a lot going on right now for Catherine.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right, we'll wait for.
Well, I'll just keep talking.
Yeah.
Hey, gang.
Good politics. Oh, there's Ian.
Yeah, we don't have Greg's mic up yet, but we'll get that.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Ian.
10-4.
How are the girls doing?
In the bronze medal game.
Awesome.
Starting at 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock tip-off.
Are you the chief cheerleader? Are you doing your all fired up?
All fired up and ready to go. We've got all the kids are into it now. So.
Waterloo has a great team, actually, across the provinces. Today is the OBA, this weekend is the Ontario Basketball Association, and what a great sport it is for young girls to get involved in.
They've had a great season.
We were just talking, Ian, and Catherine was mentioning about a minority government setting, and I guess one of my questions I'd like to have Catherine speak to with respects to that. If, of course, Catherine, this was a majority government setting, being in opposition to a majority government, you kind of just sit there and watch the world go by. But in a minority setting, that really puts a pressure on all opposition parties and opposition party MPPs to actually roll up their sleeves and get into it. And I think that's maybe what's been a great experience for you, especially just coming in last fall, but it gives you the opportunity to do a ton of learning in a short period of time and get right down to actually doing something that can make changes.
Well, you're quite right. I mean, we had almost 10 years of majority government, right? Mm-hmm. And to that point, I mean, it was their agenda, and people kept sending the majority government to Queen's Park. That said, here we are with this minority setting. Every private member's bill matters. Every motion that adapts legislation matters. And the fact of the matter is that we have to work together. And even with my private member's bill, Bill 24, to re-examine prorogation and how governments use prorogation. That was an interesting dialogue with Liberals and Conservatives, and I was quite pleased that the Liberals and Conservatives both put it to a free vote, so individual members could stand up and represent the concerns of their community and either support the private member's bill or not. And it passed, actually by 54 votes. And 8 Conservatives stood up, and several Liberals, obviously, and it's gone to second reading. And so my personal belief is that, when McGuinty did prorogue the legislature on October 15th, the business of the province was interrupted. And there's a cost to that. And in these economic times, we need to stay focused on the work of the province. And so it's going to go to second reading. We're going to have a conversation, probably adapt the bill somewhat, so that if any other future premier, be it Andrea Horwath or Mr. Hudak or Ms. Wynne, if they want to close down the legislature, they have to bring it to their colleagues, their fellow MPPs for a resolution first, and that would actually put the rest of the province on notice that this is happening. I think that it caught the entire province off guard on October 15th, and
sure.
So all of that legislation also is being reintroduced since we started to sit again on February 19th. So there's a cost to it because it's duplication, and if we do want government to be more efficient, don't we, Ian?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, we one of the things the overlay of this is the federal budget of this past week, which still has the federal government with a huge deficit, but making some investments in terms of supporting manufacturing, which is important to our region through the accelerated cost allowance, the extension of that, which helps manufacturers, the new money for Jobs Canada for training of workers, $47 billion in new funding for infrastructure right across the country, which is really important and really good for Southwestern Ontario, is the extension of Federal Development Agency of Southern Ontario. So there's some good news there, but it's still a big deficit. How do you see the provincial budget, I guess, is the important question for us next. What's going to be essential for the NDP in terms of the Ontario budget that's upcoming in the next number of weeks?
Okay, that's a good question. But I just want to touch on just the federal budget a little bit because it affects us, right? And the Conservatives chose to scrap $300 million in skills training funding to the province in order to give the money to businesses on matching funds. So they've said, instead of giving it to the province and letting us develop programs around skills training, they're going to be more dependent on businesses. We see businesses as part of the solution around skills training and job creation, but we think that the province has a role to play in it. But that's one of, Andrea Horwath, our leader, has been very public. She's put forward 5, main goals as we navigate through what is going to be a very complex budget process. And our number one priority really has to do with jobs for youth, and it's our first Start Jobs program. It's a wage subsidy for employers to hire youth from 18 to 26. Because that's what youth have told us. They cannot get in the door. They cannot get the real job experience, and we need to incentivize that. And quite honestly, businesses have been very receptive to it because they want the help and they want to hire. And I think that's a very tangible and very accountable way to spend tax dollars. So we have our First Start job program. We've heard loud and clear around home care for elderly. We are working very closely, I hope, to achieve a 5-day home care guarantee for seniors. Recently I was knocking on doors in an apartment building. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You can tell when you knock on this door that the person in that apartment is isolated. There's a cleanliness issue, there's a nutrition issue, and there's an overall health issue. And that senior needed home care. They need help to stay in their homes. And actually, it's a very cost-effective and fiscally responsible way to actually serve seniors in their own home versus a long-term care facility with wait lists or an emergency room or a hospital.
You're listening to Business on 570 News, powered by Allstream. Joined in studio by Kitchener-Waterloo MPP Catherine Fife. And on the line is Ian McLean, Greater KW Chamber of Commerce President and CEO, and in studio is Greg DeRocher, President and CEO of the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce. Greg?
Therein maybe, I guess, is a really interesting question when you talk about the home care for seniors. And one of the staples of the Emerging Stronger document from the Ontario Chamber of Commerce is talking about engaging the non-profit sector more in the delivery of provincial services. We're never going to be able to meet every single need that there is for seniors to have home care. But don't you think that having the province deliver those services or funding those services to be delivered internally is maybe part of the issue? Shouldn't that be something that the nonprofit or and private sector should be engaged in as well?
Well, I've been serving on the finance committee at the provincial level, and so on Friday we listened to 32 delegations, and one of them was the not-for-profit Home Care Association. When they open their books and they show their books to us, and they make a case for actually fair funding, because right now they're completely underfunded. Just as an example, $7 a day to feed a senior. That's a 20% increase since 2003. $7. I mean, so I think that, quite honestly, the not-for-profit sector hasn't been given the tools and the resources to do the job properly. And you know, it's just, for some reason, it hasn't been a high priority. We are going to try to make it a priority, and that's the power of a minority government, is that you can actually bring the real needs of people to that table and push the envelope on that.
One of the things that we've talked about several times on the show over the past year is the Drummond Report. So, and it talks about the importance of how we deliver services and the importance of the not-for-profit in delivering services that are important to people. I maybe just explain what your position is in the NDP as it relates to that extensive report that really addressed how we deliver services, but also get on top of our fiscal crisis in Ontario.
I mean, we've been very public. I mean, the Drummond Report was commissioned by the McGuinty government to sort of navigate through the last budget. They quite honestly, the McGuinty government didn't listen to the Drummond Report. There were some good recommendations in that report. He's not the only economist in the province, but you know, if you're going to ask for the report, then you should probably pay attention to it, especially since we paid for it. But we've been very selective about what's in that report and what we feel actually just meets the real needs of Ontarians. And the wage freeze question, Mr. Drummond did not recommend a wage freeze, because in the end you end up paying more down the line. So clearly the Liberals were very selective about what they listened to as well.
Sorry, in what sense do you mean we pay more down the line if a wage freeze is instituted?
Well, because it goes to arbitration. So you get I mean, there were unions in this province, I want to be very clear, that signed on to a 2-year 0-0. Smokey Thomas was in the finance committee yesterday. They got 232 contracts at 0-0. But when you do a hard line wage freeze, there's a whole host of economic fallout from that. I mean, in lost revenue and lost expenditures in the community. But when that contract comes up for renewal, you go right back to the increase. You make up for the lost time and the wage freeze, because you know usually it's tied to cost of living, and good cases can be made for cost of living investment around wages.
All right, we're going to take a break and come back with more. Our guest is Catherine Fife, the NDP MPP for the riding of Kitchener-Waterloo, in discussion with Greg DeRocher, president of the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce, and our co-host, as usual on the program, Ian McLean, president of the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce. You're listening to Business, powered by Allstream on 570 News.
We'll be right back with more Business to Business, powered by Allstream. Call in with your questions at star 570, 570-2545, or 1-800-570-5715.
Cost of living investment around wages.
All right, we're going to take a break and come back with more. Our guest is Catherine Fife, the NDP MPP for the riding of Kitchener-Waterloo, in discussion with Greg DeRocher, president of the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce, and our co-host, as usual on the program, Ian McLean, president of the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce. You're listening to Business, powered by Allstream on 570 News.
We'll be right back with more Business to Business, powered by Allstream. Call in with your questions at star 570, 570-2545, or 1-800-570-5715. It's not just what you know, it's who you know. Connecting community through business. This is Business to Business on 570 News. Powered by Allstream. All local, all relevant. Allstream.com. Here's your host, Glenn Pelletier.
Hey, welcome back to Business on 570 News, powered by Allstream. We are delighted to have back with us Catherine Fife, NDP MPP for the riding of Kitchener-Waterloo, and I guess we last spoke with Catherine shortly after she was elected, or?
That's correct.
Yeah. And,
did you know, too, that she's one of the 7 MPPs identified to watch?
Which is, sometimes it's bad when they're
And yeah,
watching.
who compiled that list?
Queen's Park
Briefing. And
expand on that. Based on what criteria?
She's the only female.
So, yeah, interesting. Based on which criteria? Just people that have it
well,
kind of together and are making an impact?
It's I think Queen's Park Briefing is a sort of an insider paper for Queen's Park, and I think it came out before the Christmas, and I think that they're just looking to see who's trying to, they're people are always watching you, and now they're actually watching a little bit closer. But I think that they're identifying, MPPs that are trying to get some work done. And,
not afraid to speak up and have some momentum.
Well, that's why we're there, right? And the opportunity exists, as I said, in the minority setting, and to that end, the 5 priorities that I started talking about prior. The First Start program for youth, the 5-day home care guarantee, and the 15% cut in auto insurance for drivers. Now, this recommendation has come forward because in 2010, the Liberal government enacted some changes to the auto insurance industry, which actually saved the auto insurance industry about $2 billion. So they standardized, what people could claim for instance. That was a long time in the making, I think, that those changes. It was thought at the time, and Dwight Duncan, who was Minister of Finance at the time, said this will result in savings for Ontarians who are drivers. In fact, the opposite has happened, and auto insurance has steadily increased 5% a year. And we think that a 15% reduction would save drivers about $220 a year. And if there's savings to be had, then that savings should get passed on to drivers. I was in a coffee shop the other day, and this idea actually has a lot of traction. It's a popular idea because it hits people at their home, right, on their wallet. And he said, he's paying the same auto insurance, the same amount that his actual car is worth. And so especially seniors have really rallied around that. The other thing is the $200 employment earnings rule change for those people who are on OW and ODSP, and 570 has been very good about getting those issues out into the general public. And this was a recommendation from the Social Assistance Review. So if you're on Ontario Works or ODSP and you want to work, you weren't able to keep any of the money. There was no incentive for you to actually go out and try to find some part-time
I've heard
employment.
lots of those stories.
Yeah. And so this way you can keep the first $200. We don't necessarily think that $200 is enough, but it's a starting point. And it's so.
You are listening to Business on 570 News, powered by Allstream, in discussion with Kitchener-Waterloo NDP MPP Catherine Fife. Last week we spoke with Michael Harris, the Kitchener-Conestoga Conservative MPP, and in a couple of weeks we will have John Malloy, the Kitchener Centre Liberal MPP, in discussion on the program as we look ahead to the provincial budget. And is there a time frame for that? Do we know?
Well, there's no time frame yet. That's what's really interesting. I think, in all fairness, they were probably smart in holding back until the feds delivered their budget, because that could obviously have an effect on the provincial budget, and it has.
Well, this would be my first. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ian.
No, I was just going to say, traditionally, it comes out 3 or 4 weeks usually after the federal budget. And I guess that, you talked about your priorities, Catherine. I think it's important. The politics of this is as important as anything else. You've got your 5 priorities. What happens if you don't get those? Because, I think Michael was pretty clear last week or a couple of weeks ago that the Conservatives are not supporting this budget because they're not going to have anything that they see as being moving in the right direction. What happens if you don't get your 5 priorities? Are we into a provincial election?
Okay, but first, just on that, the Conservatives are not supporting the throne speech, which is just the mission statement for the government. And the Conservatives have already said they're not going to support a budget, and they haven't even seen the budget. So they've taken themselves out of the negotiation. They've actually sort of establish the fact that they can't bring the priorities of the people that sent them to Queen's Park to the table, and we think that's irresponsible. So you're right. These 5 priorities, Andrea Horvath, NDP, we've been very clear that that these are things that we are absolutely committed to, and it's important to do that because if you'll remember the last budget process, Ian, We did make some headway. We had some key priorities that we put forward and that we negotiated through the last budget process. And then there was some game playing. I mean, there was some name calling, and it was messy, and that doesn't serve the province of Ontario. Thus far, though, we've heard very good things from the Liberals on these priorities, and I think the onus is on the new Premier, Kathleen Wynne, to come to the table and say, okay, these are things that we're willing to work with you on.
Are you suggesting then that Andrea may say we're not going to support him if all 5 aren't in? Or?
No. I mean, I think that people sent us to Queen's Park to get results for them. That's our focus. That's what we're trying to get done for the people of the province. These are the priorities that they've identified through our jobs roundtable and through our consultation. So we went out and we listened to the people. They said that these are issues that they really care about. We've brought them to the government. In essence, the balance of the responsibility now lies on the Premier and the government to say, okay, well, these, they've been talking a lot about respect. They've been talking a lot. But they've been, the conversation is the buzzword. It's the joke word actually at Queen's Park, and what we want to see is action.
And I think these regardless of the priorities of the Liberal, the NDP, or the Conservative government, I think the priority from our perspective, from the business's perspective, is really taking care of this $12 billion deficit that we see now. We need to have a defined plan going forward where we're going to see that is going to become a balanced budget. The third largest expense for the province of Ontario right now is the interest on our debt. That shouldn't be the third largest expense behind healthcare and education. That should be way down the list from our perspective. And I think that that needs to be a high priority item as well. And it doesn't, I guess when we had Michael Harrison a couple of weeks ago and we talked about him, I said it almost appears on the outside looking in that there's no courage at Queen's Park to say, you know what, you're people of Ontario, you're absolutely right. We have to get this under control. We have to get our expenditures. We have to live within our means. And that doesn't necessarily mean creating new revenue opportunities. That means creating opportunities to reduce our costs in some way.
And I think that's fundamentally the difference. I mean, we see a more balanced approach. We think that revenue and increasing revenue is actually a key to balancing the budget and addressing the deficit. And actually, it's been proven to be very successful. In our last budget, we negotiated a 2% increase in taxes for those people who make over $500,000. That polled extremely well in the province. We generated almost $600 million from that, and that went directly to the deficit and to hold to those very priorities that people said are important. So that's actually our fifth priority: a balanced approach to budget process.
All right, we're going to take a break and come back. We have an Allstream segment, as we are delighted to have Allstream on board as our main sponsor. We'll find out what's going on at Allstream, and we will continue the discussion with Catherine Fife. You're staying right till the end, 1 o'clock, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. We will continue the discussion with Catherine Fife, Kitchener-Waterloo NDP MPP, in discussion with Greg DeRocher and Ian McLean on 570 News. You are listening to Business, powered by Allstream on 570 News.
Business to Business, powered by Allstream, a presentation of 570 News. Watch the live video webcast at 570news.com. We'll return with more Business to Business. Connecting community through business. This is Business to Business on 570 News, powered by Allstream. All local, all relevant, allstream.com. Here's your host, Glenn Pelletier.
Welcome back to Business on 570 News, powered by Allstream. And we are delighted to be joined now by Craig DeVoe of Allstream. And let's talk to Craig now.
Craig, it's Greg DeRocher. Thanks very much for taking the time today to join us on the show. You've got some big shoes to fill because we've had some great experts coming on from Allstream. So it's once again, it's a pleasure to have you.
And I'm looking forward to joining you today. Thanks for the opportunity to speak with you.
Craig, in keeping with the theme of last month's show where we talked about collaboration with Dax Nair, talk to us a little bit about distributed denial of service, or DDoS attacks. More specifically, What is the DDoS service, and why should businesses be concerned?
Well, first of all, maybe I'll start with a definition of what a DDoS attack is, and very simply, it's an attempt to make a network resource or service unavailable for its intended users. And what we see today, and actually in the news, you hear more and more about high-profile DDoS attacks. It's becoming more prevalent, so that's why it's on the radar screen of a lot of companies nowadays. And if you keep that within the context of collaboration and unified communications, as we move towards an IP-centric connectivity type of framework, which businesses now operate, obviously they're exposed to new internet-based threats, and DDoS represents one of the more recent and very effective attack vectors that are used against companies of all sizes.
Can you give me an example of a DDoS attack?
Sure. I mean, if you've been following the news recently, you've probably seen that the banking industry in the United States has been under attack by Iran. So that's an example of a nation state targeting specific companies or organizations for maybe a political agenda. Another example, when we had the Occupy movement, you heard about Anonymous threatening to target financial institutions and stock exchanges and organizations like that. So, those are more of the high-profile types of attacks. But DDoS can, like I said, you can attack companies of all sizes. It's a more of a horizontal type of threat that's a risk to companies of all sizes across all industries.
We're on the line with Craig DeVoe. He is the Senior Product Manager for Security Services with Allstream, and he's in conversation with Greg DeRocher, President and CEO of the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce, and Ian McLean, President and CEO of the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce. Gentlemen?
Yeah, so this is really important for people to understand, because I think as we've heard in many of our shows and from some of your colleagues at Allstream, more and more of every business is reliant on e-commerce, if you will, of all descriptions. So how does a business be prepared for one of these distributed denial of service attacks or these DDoS attacks?
Well, I think one of the first steps that they have to do is really take a step back and realize that the threats have changed and they evolve over time, and they should really revisit, at least on an annual basis, their security policies and procedures, and also their incident response plan, because these threats aren't static; they change over time, and you have to be able or be prepared to deal with new and emerging threats. So, that's more procedural, but there's also technology that you could potentially deploy to help protect your networks. Now, most customers, they think of network security and they focus at the perimeter, and they would say, well, I have a firewall, or I might have an intrusion prevention appliance, and those are essential tools that are required as part of your security infrastructure, but they're not really designed to block DDoS attacks. Actually, DDoS attacks, in many cases, exploit the inherent weaknesses in those types of platforms, and sometimes those platforms become targeted themselves. So, when you're looking for a solution, you should really focus. Again, make sure you have the policies and procedures in place, that people are trained so that they can recognize the DDoS attack and they know how to respond. But also, you have to have the right technology deployed that's designed to deal with the core DDoS threat, and that's something that's really hard to do yourself, because even if you were able to deploy an appliance on your customer prem, DDoS, you have to think of it almost like an arms race, and the adversaries that are targeting you, they have virtually unlimited access to resources to attack you. So even if you were able to invest in new equipment and upgrade and expand your capacity over time, you'll never keep up with being able to stay ahead of your attackers. So the best thing to do is probably work with an upstream provider who's invested in this type of infrastructure that helps mitigate the DDoS attacks before they even touch your network.
Well, then, for more information on how to protect.
All right, that was Craig DeVoe in conversation with Ian McLean and Greg DeRocher on 570 News. This segment of Business to Business is brought to you by Save on Energy, offered by your local electric utilities. We're going to come back with more. We're in discussion with Catherine Fife, Kitchener-Waterloo NDP MPP. Lots more to get to including the upcoming LeaderCast at the Chambers. We'll tell you about that. It takes place on May the 10th, a fascinating day, and we'll tell you all about that as Business to Business continues on 570 News, powered by Allstream.
We'll be right back with more Business to Business, powered by Allstream. Call in with your questions at star 570 570 2545 or 1-800-570-5715. It's not just what you know, it's who you know. Connecting community through business. This is Business to Business on 570 News. Powered by Allstream. All local, all relevant. Allstream.com. Here's your host, Glenn Pelletier.
Welcome back to Business on 570 News, powered by Allstream. This segment brought to you by Save On Energy, offered by your local electric utilities. We're in conversation with Catherine Fife, NDP MPP for the riding of Kitchener-Waterloo, who swept to victory in the by-election in the riding last September. And we're speculating now, Catherine, but we're trying to determine generally when the provincial budget might be tabled. What is your sense of when we might see something?
Well, it's an interesting question, because I think Ian is right. Like, normally 3 to 4 weeks following the federal, the budget gets tabled, but we usually have a date, and it is rare for us not to have a date yet. This came up at Finance Committee just on Friday, and because we're doing budget consultation, and if you're going to do budget consultation, and then you're going to write the report on that consultation, that should inform the budget, the final budget, because that's an important part of it. And so we were deciding whether or not to go to Thunder Bay. We put a motion. We are going to Thunder Bay, but we're still doing it within the context of not knowing that final date. I think it's going to be the end of April, which is pushing it, because that money has to flow. Various organizations and departments need to know what their budget is for that year so they can plan responsibly. And so that's where we are with that, is that we still do not have a budget date. And we have a new finance minister, and and a lot is riding on it. I think everybody understands
and
that.
At this point, is your party generally expected to vote in favor?
Well, no, we want to see the budget, and we want to make sure that the 5 priorities that I've mentioned are going to be in.
So if the 5 priorities that have been outlined by the NDP aren't there, then what?
Then we're going to go to a budget. We're going to go to an election. Yeah.
Well, we're talking about the budget, and that's going to happen over time. I mean, a couple of things. The life goes on for business, notwithstanding what happens at Queen's Park or in Ottawa. I mean, we're pleased to be with the Cambridge Chamber presenting a couple of big events, LeaderCast, which we'll talk about just at the end, but the Manufacturing Innovation Network Summit, our second annual event that we're co-hosting. And, I think it's really important. We've got Ray Tanguay, who's the president of Toyota, and Peter Hall, the chief economist of Export Development Canada, talking about how we support manufacturing, which is still 20% of our local economy in the region of Waterloo. Because was manufacturing that's left is advanced manufacturing involving technology and skilled trades. So I guess the question is, what's the NDP, your party's position in terms of how to support that critical component of our local and provincial economy?
Well, we've been consulting, obviously, and listening to the manufacturing sector all through the fall, all through this year. And what we've been told is that there's definitely a skills gap around manufacturing. So one of our areas of focus is to actually connect the post-secondary education experience in a very direct way to the skills that are needed in the manufacturing sector. And obviously, we have our job creator tax credit as well, which rewards those companies, manufacturing or industry, to when they create jobs, a job creator tax credit, because we think that the companies that are actually stepping up and creating employment opportunities should be rewarded. So we've been very focused on the manufacturing sector, and you're quite right. I mean, when we did those jobs roundtables, we heard very clearly is that there's a disconnect between the post-secondary education piece and the needed skills in the manufacturing sector, and this is a long-standing issue. And I think that there's room to invest in the college field to ensure that the knowledge economy, the applied economy, whatever language you want to use, is that students are graduating into real jobs.
I think you heard too. I attended one of your roundtables along with John Tibbetts as well, Catherine, and both of us were kind of singing that same tune that. we seem to be becoming a society of thinkers and not doers, and we must be doers as well as thinkers. And
yeah. And we also heard, that was a very powerful roundtable, I thought, because that's where we talked a lot about education. And we've been, my background is in public education, and, I think that's where the Chamber has done a really good job of coming up with their recommendations around creating entrepreneurial opportunities in the public education, the classroom experience, because this is the applied knowledge piece that we're missing, is that, yes, there's been a focus on literacy and numeracy, great. Those are basic skills. But, you have to put that knowledge into action in order to ground it. And the university students as well, they love the co-op opportunities because it gives them real experience to put that knowledge into play. And so I think that there's a lot of room for improvement as far as connecting the public education experience with the post-secondary. And the whole stigma of where you go after high school, whether to a college or to a university. We have to have an honest conversation about that, and there's that conversation word again. But it's true. There's definitely room for improvement around the skills trades.
I think from the Chamber's perspective, and maybe business's perspective, we feel a little bit, I hate to say shut out, but we almost feel that we're pushed out of that public education system that's there now, that we should probably be invited into the process.
Well, and that would be I think a natural partnership, right? Is that but to be quite honest, though, in the focus on education has been dealing with this crisis and the conflict in education, and we're going to have to refocus the critical thinking skills, the creativity, the connecting, and the communication. Those are the skill sets that our students require to move into the workforce. But having real lived experiences in business, in the community, actually embeds that knowledge. And I think that's a competitive edge that we need to refocus on.
I could remember years ago having the conversation and with the boards of education when I was in another life, more politically driven, I suppose, but having the heads of the boards of education say to me, well, Greg, yeah, that's fine, but our job as an education institution is really to teach kids to make their own mind up and be decision makers. Well, but we need to be a part of that as well, so that helps them understand what's out there for them. There was I can remember David Johnson, before he got a new job, saying that the University of Waterloo was losing a lot of their graduates to other communities because they were moving out of the region as opposed to staying into the region, which I think that's changed a little bit. But at the same time, if we want kids to stay at home after they finish their formal education, they need to know what's here for them. And if we're insulating them from that, that's why we're going to lose them to other areas, other cities.
And I think you're pointing to the fact that, the Waterloo region is a great place to live and work. But it also, we need, it comes down to healthcare and to the environment and to the work opportunities. And that's, I strongly believe that budgets are truly moral documents. They really tell the story of the priorities of government, and they should reflect the real needs of people in the province. Sorry. And so that's why the budget process actually is so important. And it's really disappointing that the Conservatives have just said, you know what, we're not going to try to make it work. I think you really have a responsibility to the electorate to try. And that's what people said to me very clearly in the by-election. They said, we've never elected a New Democrat before. We want to see results. And so get to work. And that's what we're trying to do through this budget process.
Pressure's on. Pressure's on.
Were you satisfied with what the federal budget that was tabled last week had to say about skills training?
No, I think that I think it's a missed opportunity at the federal level, and I think there was a lot of talk actually in the federal budget about infrastructure and about those infrastructure dollars. And I'm also the critic for infrastructure. And coming from a background really of social infrastructure, I have a new appreciation for culverts and bridges and roads and highways and wastewater systems. And I think the federal government in the past had done an okay job of investing dollars in those projects, because municipalities have said to us very clearly, we need help, because you can't fund infrastructure on the backs of the local taxpayer. It's not sustainable. There isn't enough revenue to do it properly. So the federal government really they missed an opportunity to step up in a very real way.
Well, to be fair, though, Catherine,
now we're interested in being fair, are we?
The Canadian Federation of Municipality was quite pleased with the announcement of bringing more certainty. I mean, that their national president indicated that. So, I mean, they're moving in the right direction of giving more certainty to municipalities. But the underlying theme is everyone's got to make tough choices in elected office.
Well, that is true, but the Federation of Canadian Municipalities also has a very clear picture. It's a $50 billion of work that needs to be done, and so, and if the longer we wait, the more it's going to cost.
All right, we've got a couple of minutes now to get some information in about what you guys have got coming up at your chambers on May the 10th. Let's get into that. So anybody listening who may want to attend this great summit, this LeaderCast conference, can do so.
Well, on May the 10th, we have LeaderCast. Of course, this is the second year that the Greater KW and the Cambridge Chamber have worked together on this. It's a day of leadership development, motivational talks, outstanding networking with over 400 professionals in all-in-one room in a full-day event. So over 125,000 people in North America took part in this last year. We have 9 speakers. Condoleezza Rice, former Secretary of State, Jack Welch, former CEO of GE, John Maxwell and Andy Stanley, who are motivationalists as well as communicators. And that event is actually live broadcast via satellite
across North America. And so you're part of this select audience.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's incredibly professionally well done, very well organized. Ian and I had a great time last year, and there's just terrific speakers. And I think, Ian, you have another the Rapid Transit Trade Show that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, the Rapid Transit Trade Show. We've got an $818 million infrastructure program on the LRT, and we're coordinating an opportunity for business to understand what the opportunities are for local business to participate in that through some subcontracts with the consortium. So that's coming up on April 23rd, and our Men's Summit we just talked about, and again, LeaderCast. I can't believe you forgot Coach Krzyzewski from Duke Blue Devils. For those of us that are at basketball tournaments today in Chatham, Ontario, he'll be really interesting. He's been a real success. So, but that's a great day. We had 250 people last year. I expect we'll have 400 plus this year. Great day of networking and well worth it.
And accreditation too for HR professionals and the legal professionals.
All right, thanks guys. Again, LeaderCast May 10th, Manufacturing Summit May 1st, Rapid Transit Trade Show April 23rd. For more information, go to Cambridge Chamber. That's cambridgechamber.com. or greaterkwchamber.com. Thanks to Catherine Fife for being our guest this afternoon. Really appreciate that.
We'll have to have you back again.
It's a pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity to share.
Great to chat with you. Yeah. And thanks as well to our producers, Liz Russell and Catherine Drake. You have been listening to Business, powered by Allstream on 570 News.